The air in the stadium didn't just feel steel. It felt ill. For 302 days, the women's division had been functioning, yes, but operating beneath a silent, heavy question mark. The queen of dominance, Rhea Ripley, had vanished from the main stage, not with a whimper, but with a sudden medically mandated halt. Her last image was not of defeat, but of defiant fury, being escorted away while throwing curses over her shoulder. The fans remembered the intensity, the almost terrifying focus, and in her absence, a power vacuum had formed that no challenger, no matter how talented, could truly fill. Tonight was the pay-per-view main event, a spectacular triple threat match for the title she never truly lost. The crowd was electric, focused on the immediate conflict, but beneath the cheers, an undercurrent of collective longing pulsed. They wanted a definitive answer, a final confrontation. The commentary team spoke in hushed, reverent tones about the three competitors building the drama. But the camera, in a subtle moment of cinematic foreshadowing, kept panning back to the entrance. Ramp a dark, yawning void. It was an unspoken acknowledgement of the past. Suddenly, a singular, low-frequency hum resonated through the speakers, causing a pregnant silence to fall over 70,000 people. It wasn't music, it was a vibrational warning. The hum reached an almost painful resonance, a physical pressure in the chest. Then, the immense darkness that had enveloped the arena became absolute, a perfect, silent void. The championship competitors in the ring froze, their eyes darting towards the ramp, their expressions a mix of fear and recognition. This was not a scheduled blackout. This was a cinematic statement. And then, boom! The sound hit like a seismic shockwave, accompanied by a blinding flash of crimson and orange light. From the floor of the ramp, two pillars of pure, theatrical fire erupted, licking upwards towards the lighting truss. The silhouette of a figure, unmistakable in its posture and imposing stature, began to emerge, not walking, but rising from the inferno. This wasn't just an entrance, it was a theatrical resurrection. The musica heavier, darker, more industrial remix of her original theme slammed into existence, drowning out the roar of the crowd, yet somehow amplifying it. This was the moment the question mark was obliterated. The commentators lost all professional composure, their voices cracking with raw, unfiltered emotion. The eradicator rises from the flames. Rhea Ripley is back, stronger, darker, and more dangerous than ever before. This isn't just a return, it's a resurrection of dominance. The camera caught one challenger collapsing to her knees, not from a hit, but from the sheer, overwhelming psychological weight of the moment. The balance of power had violently shifted in an instant. The immediate aftermath was one of controlled chaos backstage. Unlike the electrifying reaction of the live audience, the mood behind the curtain was one of deep, simmering conflict. The corporate executives, who had been scrambling to contain the fallout of her forced hiatus, were now locked in hushed, intense debates. Rhea Ripley's return was an unscheduled, unsanctioned, and absolutely stunning power play. It was a breach of protocol, a defiance of the carefully constructed recovery plan that had been laid out for her. One senior official was overheard saying she didn't ask permission, she demanded the moment back. The rest of the roster The men and women who had carried the torch in her absence watched the live feed on the monitors with a complex cocktail of emotions. Relief for the company's financial bottom line mixed with a profound, sinking dread. She hadn't just returned to a show. She had interrupted the main event, stealing the spotlight from the championship contenders and reducing their entire storyline to a footnote. The unspoken tension among the competitors was palpable. A new, far more terrifying storm had just arrived, and the carefully crafted hierarchy of the locker room had been shattered by the sound of her music. They knew instantly that the days of polite, competitive wrestling were over. Dominance had a new name, and it felt like a threat. For the existing champion, the psychological damage was instantaneous and severe. She wasn't just facing a new challenger, she was facing a living legend who had just invalidated her entire reign with a single theatrical flourish. For months, the champion had carried the title with honor, working exhausting schedules, delivering powerful promos, and proving her worth night after night. Yet, in the eyes of the global audience, all that effort had been rendered hollow. The crowd's reaction to Rhea's return, the sheer, deafening intensity of the cheer was not just an ovation. It was a collective statement that they had been waiting for the real champion to return. This creates an enormous, suffocating legacy pressure. The champion now has to justify her existence not just against Rhea Ripley, but against the ghost of a reign that everyone believes belongs to the woman who just returned. The emotional weight of this realization is crippling. It's the difference between being a successful title holder and being the true, undeniable face of the division. The champion steps back. Air is wide, staring at the figure on the ramp, and it's a look of a person who has suddenly realized the ceiling they've been celebrating under is about to collapse on top of them. The story isn't about if she will lose the title. It's about how she will survive the onslaught to come. The moment Rhea Ripley's boots hit the stage, the online world didn't just react, it exploded. The velocity of the viral moment was unlike anything the company had seen in years. The clip of her ascending from the flames, frozen in time, became the most shared image globally within the hour. Traditional sports media outlets, who often view wrestling with a critical distance, were forced to cover it as a mainstream cultural event. Headlines screamed not about who won the match, but about the statement made by the woman who crashed it. The media narrative instantly shifted from a predictable, professional sports story to a compelling, high-stakes drama. Journalists and podcasters debated the implications. Was this a brilliant, meticulously planned creative stroke, or a terrifyingly real display of an athlete taking complete control of their own narrative? The beauty of the moment lay in its ambiguity, feeding the curiosity. The company's social media team was overwhelmed, unable to keep up with the sheer volume of organic discussion. The trending topics were dominated by her name, her new entrance, and the dramatic pause before the boom. It was a masterclass in cinematic spectacle, demonstrating that in the age of instant content, the emotional hook is everything. She didn't need a press conference. She just needed a fire, a pause, and the undeniable power of her presence to dominate the global conversation. The story was hers again, away from the blinding chaos of the media cycle. The most profound reaction was found in the intimate, reflective spaces of the fandom. Forums and fan communities were filled, not with simple excitement, but with deeply personal confessions. Fans wrote about how her initial injury felt like a sudden loss of momentum in their own lives, a reflection of their own struggles and setbacks. Her return, therefore, wasn't just a wrestling moment. It was a deeply symbolic act of personal resilience. One fan posted a detailed reflection that went viral within the community, saying, "I watched her come back from the fire, and I felt the strength to get up from my own floor. This is the real power of the cinematic return, the ability to transcend the spectacle and touch the emotional core of the audience." They weren't just cheering for an athlete, they were cheering for a narrative that mirrored their desire to overcome their own private battles. The wrestling ring becomes a metaphorical stage for human struggle, and Rhea Ripley, the Eradicator, becomes the vessel for their collective desire to rise from the ashes. This emotional investment is what gives the story its weight and its longevity. It creates a bond far stronger than any manufactured storyline. The cheers were an outpouring of gratitude, relief, and a shared feeling of empowerment. The emotional immersion extends beyond the arena and the internet, reaching the most personal circle, the family. For her parents, watching their daughter emerge from a literal pillar of flame was not a moment of pure, unadulterated pride, but a complicated mixture of awe and profound, quiet concern. They had lived through the agonizing months of her recovery, the painful physiotherapy, the moments of doubt, the deep frustration of a competitive spirit caged by a physical limitation. They had seen the vulnerable and eradicator side of their daughter. The Rhea Ripley they saw on the screen was a persona, a character built on steel and fire. But the young woman behind the persona was their child, who had just risked her health and career on an unsanctioned stunt. The silence in their living room was heavy. They understood the drive, the ambition, the need to reclaim her narrative with the most dramatic flourish possible. But the performance came at a cost. The true weight of her dominance, for them, was not the championship belt, but the mental fortitude it took to return to the brutality of the ring. They knew the intensity of her focus was often fueled by a terrifying Their reaction wasn't a cheer. It was a shared, anxious breath, a silent prayer for her safety. They understood that the resurrection came with a renewed potential for sacrifice. The most interesting consequence of Rhea's return is the unexpected shift in the motivation of her future challengers. The initial fear quickly morphed into a profound, clarifying anger. The woman she interrupted, who had worked tirelessly to be the best, now had a singular, undeniable target. The dominance Rhea represented was so complete, so overwhelming, that it didn't just crush her rivals. It gave them a reason to train harder, to push past their perceived limits. Rhea Ripley became the definitive mountain to climb. Her return didn't scare the division into submission. It galvanized it into ferocious opposition. A new challenger realizes beating Rhea Ripley is no longer about winning a title. It's about proving one's entire worth in the industry. It's about dethroning a psychological icon. This new focus replaces petty rivalries with a unified goal to prove that the Queen of Dominance can be stopped. The story instantly gained stakes far beyond the gold. It became a David versus Goliath narrative, but David is now angrier, wiser, and more focused than ever before. This unforeseen consequent creation of a hyper-motivated, singular-minded challenger adds a layer of unpredictable drama. Rhea's dominance is so total that it might be the very thing that breeds her downfall. The music fades, the fire dies down, and the roar of the crowd begins its long, slow dissipation. Rhea Ripley stands alone at the top of the ramp, her eyes locked on the championship belt lying on the mat. In this moment of cinematic stillness, a profound internal reflection occurs. The persona of the Eradicator is pure power, unassailable. But the person underneath feels the crushing weight of the crown. The resurrection of dominance was a performance, a necessary dramatic act to reclaim her spot. But it instantly doubled the pressure. Now, she can't just be a dominant force. She has to be the dominant force every single night. The expectations of the crowd, the fear in the locker room, the worried silence of her family all converge into a single, suffocating realization. The moment of her return was a flash of pure adrenaline, but the months ahead will be a marathon of self-justification. Every look, every match, every promo will be held up against the impossible standard of the woman who rose from the flames. The emotional paradox is revealed. Her power, born of that spectacular return, is now her greatest vulnerability. She can never afford to have an off night, a dull match, or a moment of doubt. The queen must always be perfect, and that perfection comes at the cost of genuine human relief. She is forever defined by the fire. The Queen of Dominance has returned, the crowd has gone home, and the world has been set ablaze by the viral moment. But the final, most enduring consequence twist is not about the championship, the media, or the challengers. It's about the unintended creation of the next generation. We pull away from the main story, the loud conflict, to focus on a small, quiet moment. The camera follows a young, animated girl who was in the front row. She wasn't just entertained. She was fundamentally changed. The moment Rhea Ripley rose from the flames, the girl didn't just see a spectacle. She saw an archetype of uncompromising female power. She saw someone take a setback and injury and turn it into a statement of defiant, self-created strength. For this young girl, and countless others like her, the wrestling match is irrelevant. What matters is the message, that you can define your own return, that your fire can be stronger than your fear, and that a woman can command an arena simply by existing with undeniable force. The twist is this: Rhea Ripley's resurrection of dominance wasn't for the title, the company, or the fans. It was a deeply personal, symbolic act that has unintentionally planted the seed of the woman who will, a decade from now, be her most formidable successor. She has created her own ultimate rival, not in the ring, but in the heart of a young fan who now knows what true, unyielding dominance looks like. The cycle continues, sparked by a single, unforgettable night of fire.